Hi, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I think some of you are dialing in late for us. We are going to start shortly here while everybody flowing in from the waiting room into the main presentation room. We got quite a bit of exciting, information to share today, but especially it looks like a lot of pre-registrants. So we're going to wait and give everybody about a minute or so before we get started. So we'll come right back. Okay, looks like we got quite a bit of folks that join us. We are going to go ahead and get started. I want to thank you for everyone for joining us today, taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us. My name is Carson Choi. I'll actually be your host and also your moderator when it comes down to our Tech Talk session. We want to share a little bit today, such as a slightly different than what you have seen in the past from slide, because I think a lot of time when you see webinar that comes from different vendor like ourselves, it tends to really get into the telling you what the product does, what it doesn't do. Well, we're going to do something a little different here. This is a new series that we're starting, and we'd love to have your feedback when you comment at the end. It's called Slide Lab. Lab, what that really means is thing that we're experimenting, we're testing new things, especially you'll be hearing from one of our co-founder, Austin McChord, of the experimentation we're playing around with, and really be able to push the limitation of MSP vendor solutions, not limited to slide, but other product in the market. So in essence, we want to be able to kind of show you how we believe you can actually turbocharge your MSP with our open API and using technology like AI. We also got some pretty exciting partner that coming on board with us with Tim Grimm from PCH Technologies and Dan Morgan from Technologize. They will join us at the end for Tech Talk, really get deep into what their experience is using different type of API and using AI, leveraging AI into their day-to-day business. With that said, let's go ahead and get started on the next slide. I just want to go for a little bit for those of you who might have not heard of Slide, who we are. Slide was actually co-founded by both Austin McChord, founder of Datto, uh, and Michael Fast, who was the co-founder, president, CEO here. He was our general counsel back in Datto. This is actually a organization we put together after probably the acquisition of Datto, and we actually saw this an opportunity here for us to really bring back the magic of Datto. And so we brought together a lot of these so-called the OG of Datto, including Still, Hecko, Sergio, you hear me speak a little later, and myself, to really go bring back to you what would the modern BCDR would look like. Specifically, how do we kind of reinvent the business of BCDR with what the future to like built for the next 15 years. With that, on the next slide, you'll see a little bit about our vision and mission of who we are. Specifically, we are a backup company. Everything that we do is going to be on backup. So you can ensure any form of backup you see, but we start the most difficult one with BCDR. But the four critical priorities that we're focusing on is specific, and we want you to understand before we jump right into the topic. One, we are a MSP and channel only business. You will not and will ever see us going direct to your client. When we say partner, that's you. When we say customer, is your customer. So when we do things, we're doing it for you to be successful and building your business, building margin to your business, and continue to serve your customer. Second, we are a security company. Security to us is actually no longer a nice to have optional afterthought that bolt onto the solution, but rather it has to be the fundamental bake into our foundation. For us, security is first and the foremost of what we do. So everything from how do we better secure down the box to having our data to be encrypted at rest. That for us is every element of security is baked in and built into our product. Third, we are a product company. What we mean by that is majority, if not all of our staff at the beginning stage has always been engineering first. We're going to build the best product in market. We're going to build the best product, help you to build your business for the next 10, 15, next 20 years. By doing so, we absolutely believe this is the main driver of main investment. Every dollar we get back in, we're going to invest in the product, in the engineering, make a better experience. But last but not least, this is probably an area they keep hearing back from all of our partners who have joined us in the last several months as we came on board, is that support is the most vital, because when you need it the most, you want to be able to have direct to tech, direct access to a principal engineer right at the time of disaster. That is what Slide will deliver, and that is our core mission to our business. With that said, I'm going to jump right in and hand you right over to Sergio, who's going to tell you a little bit of API, and then we'll jump right into a live, showcase and demo with leading by Austin himself. Sergio, go ahead.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Sergio Espinoza here, head of product at Slide. And so I wanted to start off just by talking a little bit about Slide's API. For anything you're wanting to build, you're going to want access to some API. Our API is fully publicly available, so you can go to this on any computer. You do not have to be a Slide partner in order to see our documentation. And so some of the things I want to highlight about our API, other than we have a page dedicated, you can read more about it, is almost anything that's possible in our console. So anything you can do in Slide through the user interface, you can also do programmatically via the API. And some of the highlights there, being able to force a backup, being able to start a restore. To me, one of the most exciting ones is not only can you start that restore, but you can actually even explore what's in the restore. So with a file restore, you can actually browse the entire file tree to look for a specific file. Or for a virtualization, you can actually access the URL for that restore to actually be able to browse it. You can see backup metrics, very important to be able to have. And then one of the new and exciting ones that we've added recently is being able to pair agents. So you can do that all within our API without any issue there. So very powerful to have all of that at your fingertips. And so with that said, I think we should jump into a demo so you actually get to see how that can get used in the real world with Austin.
All right, cool. Just give me 1 second here. I'm literally pasting the last API key around, but or I don't need to. Anyways, I will share my screen here. And go with desktop 2 and share. And then everybody should be able to see that, right? And we've got kind of a new start. So first off, like this is the Claude console, but there's a lot of other stuff that you can build. And actually, sorry, one other thing, I'm gonna just tweak my camera to actually have me aligned and looking at the screen. I apologize. Yikes. Okay, haven't done a webinar in a while, so sorry about that. All right, here we go. So the API is fire. And we are super excited about it, and the ability to build really interesting, really powerful things with the API is huge. So you can go to docs.slide.tech and like see all of the content and all the info there about it, but it's more interesting sort of putting it to work and actually going and building stuff. At least just quickly, I can show you, here's all the docs. This is the API. And then the neat part is that all this API stuff is understandable by today's modern LLMs. And so one means I can go and I have an MCP server and it's easy to actually connect all this stuff together. But the second is that you don't even have to be good at this API in order for you to put it to work. And so this is kind of like the demo stuff that really gets me excited, is that we can do something here where, let's say we want to, and hold on, gotta think up, I think create a PowerShell script that uses the API and make it easier so that if I'm deploying the slide agent, like I could pair it. And so it's, can you write a PowerShell script? And sorry, just let me type. Okay, so this would allow us to basically create a PowerShell script and have it run, and I'll automatically pair the agent. And so here's a case where we're going to ask the LLM about it. And what you'll see is that the LLM is going to go, and I need to hint to it a little bit because you can see this is very generic, and I'll be like, stop. And I just ask it. And it should have a much better idea of what to do. And so now it can actually go and interact, and it should rewrite the script correctly. And so that's one of the challenges. Just LLMs are non-deterministic, but like it will go through and build a whole thing, and this works. And will automatically pair it with a slide box that has the same sort of public IP as the actual device, which is awesome. But then other sort of more complicated examples of what's possible is that we could go here, we can create something new, and I could say, let's say I want to test a full site disaster. Can you spin up a VM in the cloud for all agents BIFCO, put them on the same network, give you a WireGuard config so I can access that network, right? So like that's a pretty complicated set of things. And for me to go and do this in the slide console, like would take a little while, and you've got to do it all in the right order. But you'll see here that it will work through this process and figure out, you know, what those agents are. Put together the list, and it should actually go and spin up all those VMs, and it will just take a moment. But its ability to string together all these pieces is pretty awesome. And so has the network, and you can see it do the process here, automatically picks sensible defaults. We'll create the WireGuard peer so that we could connect to it. And now you'll see it actually go and create all these virtual machines as well. Just needs to get the cloud device, and it will spin all that up. Come on. It's always when you do the demo. And so it's putting them all together. And finally, the SQL Server. Another route that you can take, and there's some pretty neat things that are possible, is that I've spent some time creating sort of a slide.recipes that has some pretty sort of wild or different things going on. And inside that, you should be able to see sort of a list of everything going on. So you can actually see the BIFCO systems being spun up here and what's going on. And this is like a full screen dashboard all built out of the slide.recipes process. And there's also a mobile web app here that will work on your phone and actually looks pretty great. All this again uses the API and allows you to go through. You can, same thing, like look at all these restores. And so even like this SQL server that was spun up, we could open a VNC console and you can see it's ready for login right here, which is pretty cool. Some other neat stuff that you can do using, and you can see this completed, and it's actually sending me the WireGuard configuration and how to get into all the VNC consoles here. Other thing that's really possible and helpful that the LLMs can help you with is like a lot of documentation stuff. And so if you're doing a bunch of documentation work, say maybe this same BIFCO scenario, we could say, can you help me with a run book for BIFCO? I think just creating sample run book with best effort is good place to start. I don't want to fill in all the details, fix the content later, and virtualize in the cloud, and we'll target about an hour. This is a case here where it should be able to go through, look at all the information that you've got, work on sort of putting together a template to match your client's needs, and you can see this stuff all comes together and helps you out on like, how would you fill this out and what would need to go in here, and how to think about RTO, what to check, prerequisites, and then even order sort of like what are the things which you would want to spin up first, etc. So this stuff is really, really powerful. And again, all builds over top that same API, which is super helpful and easy and extensible in what's possible. And we think that by providing a lot of these connectors now, we're really setting ourselves up so that as more vendors add similar type connectors, that you can start to plug all these different products together. And this is just like a little bit of the flavor of the future on what's going to be possible moving forward. Sergio?
Hi again. All right. I will share my screen again. Let me take over real quick. Hi. So I quickly wanted to go over some of the aspects of what Austin just spoke about on the MCP side. So for getting started, we have this link and we'll make sure we share it in the chat as well. But Austin has a GitHub page where he has access to the MCP. So you can download it, try it yourself. It actually has a great README attached to it as well. So that can be used to kind of walk you through the entire process. And he's been making it easier and easier for you to use yourself. So you can use it with any tool. As you saw, Austin just did that with Claude. All you really have to do past that is add your API credentials. And then I think a very important area just to mention is to make sure that you put system prompts that make sense to you, right? So the system prompts are essentially prompts that are going to happen effectively behind the scenes on everything. So you might want to say, I'm a system administrator. I want details that are technical. So that's the type of information that you that end up being very beneficial to be able to actually use something like Claude in an effective manner. So from here, I did want to just jump over a little bit of detail about prompting. So just on the recommendation side, as you saw with Austin's kind of examples, put in as much information as you can. So you want to make sure that you add details. A prompt that says something like, I lost a file, or I'm in the middle of a disaster is not going to provide enough detail for the LLM to do something with. On the other hand, having something that's long and verbose really provides detail, is explaining what type of disaster you're having, if you're missing a file, when you last saw that piece of information. That's the type of context that's incredibly useful to these AI programs to be able to really provide the result you need. I also want to call out good prompts take practice. Try different prompts out, play around with it. You'll start to get the hang of it over time. It's not something that kind of is naturally something that you'll just have first shot. It takes some practice to get used to. I always also like to add, and I am at fault at this all the time. I'm not necessarily always the best typer, so don't worry about precision. If you misspell something, that's okay. So totally fine for you to have a misspelling or to not be sure about an exact detail. So if you don't know the exact date something happened, you might say about a week ago. That's perfectly fine. So you don't have to worry about that. And then I always recommend try different prompts to see what happens. So it's very fun to experiment, see what kind of results you're getting. Playing around with those prompts kind of goes back to good prompts take practice. And then Austin showed two really cool examples. Two additional examples I like to call out is searching for a missing file. So in this example, I just say my customer name is missing a file. I think they saw it about a week ago. I think this is the file name, and let it do its thing. I'll mention that, it's a text file, but past that, you don't have to have much more precision. But again, I'm providing as much context as I can to the tool to make sure that it has access to the information you'll need to be able to search for it. That's a really fun one to try. It's very incredible to see a program kind of go through looking for this file. And that goes into the power of our AI, of our API. The file tree is actually browsable, so it can actually go through and look for this file. The other example, but Austin did it more on the disaster side, but I'll say on the local side, also incredibly useful to just mention, I had an issue with my hypervisor. I need to spin up locally. So yeah, that's very powerful. And I think Austin might demo a little bit
Yeah,
more.
I
Let's
think,
just demo it. Let's just go do it.
yeah. I think I left it on the desktop, and it should be in
The Sergio came up with a good example.
my
Is might as well do it
backups.
live.
Yeah, one of my backups on the BIFCO file server.
Your
So
screen share.
oh, did you, man, you guys take my screen share away and not
There you go.
yeah. Yeah, so you can see here, like, I sent it a really rough query. I said, hey, it's on a file server. I didn't say what the name of the file server was. And it figures it out that BIFCO-FSO1 is a file server. And these are the kind of sort of things that are really pretty cool from an LLM perspective, that its understanding of your naming and terminology just sort of comes for free. And you'll see now it's going to start browsing the file restore. So it created one. It's looking. And it's like, oh, I found the C drive. And it's going to work its way through user accounts. Administrator, desktop. Boom, found it. Here's the file. Blah, 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 blah. There's a local and a cloud download link. And like those actually work. Like I could click them and like the file will download. So that kind of stuff is really pretty cool. The other thing that I most recently did with the MCP is actually connect it to the documentation that Slide has. So I showed that API example, but if you've got questions that are things like, you know, what ports do I need to open for a Slide device on my network? It should go through and like make some assumptions and try to figure this stuff out for you. And so we'll work through the docs on that process. And what you'll also find is that then if you're asking for configuration help, right, and you want to say, hey, I need to get this configured with my Meraki firewall, or I'm trying to get this Proxmox stuff working. All those things, like the LLMs are going to be able to understand that to figure it all out, and it will come back and be like, here are the outbound connections and what's required, not set up, you know, and it's, you can see checking all the different pieces. But yeah. And it will eventually come back. System requirements really wants to be comprehensive here. But yeah. So that one will eventually come back and work. There are just a ton of other different queries that you can send it. The same thing like, can you start an image restore of BIFCO FSO1 and set it up in a way I can get it onto my Proxmox server. Can you? So like these are actual sort of restore paths and real challenges that you might have. And so it's like, it will go find the server, it's going to create the restore, and then it's going to give me instructions on here's what you need to do to import it into Proxmox. So you can see found the image export, creates the image, decides raw, because there might be a better format shipping very soon. But yeah, that image export, all this stuff is real. So that actually created that. Here's its process. Let me process export. Make sure it's available. Get the link. And so then blah, blah. There are obviously my links. And so then this is like, here's what you should do on Proxmox. You should run these things. This is how you would create it, and tells you all the different settings. And so it's like that ability to connect multiple things together. Like we're seeing the crappiest version of that right now, but it's going to just keep getting better and better and better over time. So yeah, I'll bring you back, Sergio.
All right. I actually think we should jump right into the partner side. So I'll share my screen again. And Carlson, do you want to do the intro?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm gonna jump back to my video here. Austin, stay on there real quick, and we got Dan Morgan and also Tim Grimm actually joining us. I would say both of them have been what Tim I've known each other for what several years, well before we got going on Slide, and Dan was actually one of our early partners who came on board. I really felt that was interesting, kind of get them to join us in that couple area. One being that Dan is a CTO for Technologize, and he dug into our API. And I think he broke a lot of it. He might also help write a lot of it leading up to that point, um, because he absolutely believed that almost running a headless environment, really thing. So he probably put a pretty interesting perspective on things. And then second, we also got Tim, who's pretty much built his MSP from ground up. Most recently his became part of the Lyra Tech network. But more importantly, he's a big innovator and thinking about ahead. How does AI really fit into the world? He also spent some time in Austin doing our most recent show, and really dug into what some of what you saw, what Austin had done for us in this case, and how that would really fit into the organization in that place. So we're gonna probably spend the goals of what spend about the next 15, 20 minutes, kind of have some question. I got some question, got these guys to get the conversation going, and we'll take some live question along the way. That's kind of how we're gonna play it. Again, everything is in some way improv and live. We want to make it authentic and how we're gonna run this. So maybe to start, in fact, love to hear a little about your Tim, your reaction. I mean, this is what second, third time you've seen what we have done with Claude. I think you have some reaction. I'd love to have you share a little what you thought of what you've seen from Austin and the team, and we'll kind of get the conversation started from there.
Yeah, thank you, Carlson. Happy to be here today. When I first saw what Austin was working on and Slide was working on at PAX 8, I was blown away because the MCP protocol and the way that that Slide is leveraging it I think this is what the future is going to be for next gen MSPs that can really take advantage of AI. AI has been great to be used in certain capacities right now, but when you can interact with your tools like this and do things, that would take, many, many man hours or person hours to achieve, it's really great. And things that trying to find a needle in a haystack, trying to find that one file that has just a little bit of context where a human being would be very difficult to find. So I think that this is just the start of what's to come in the MSP space, and Slide here is leading the way with this, because one of the things I've been really bullish on AI the last year and a half as far as how to use it internally at MSPs, as well as how could we build an AI as a service practice and adopt it in our clients and future clients to take advantage of it, because I believe that AI is going to be, obviously it's a game changer. It's going to change the economy. I want to make sure that PCH Technologies clients are positioned to take advantage of AI in the future, and us as an MSP, that don't become a legacy MSP, because there are going to be new MSPs that will be started up fully based around AI tools and things like that. So I think it's really important to think in that mindset.
How about you, Dan? You like I said earlier, right? You broke our API a couple of times, and you actually helped us to make it even better, right? So I'd love to hear a little bit about how you think, but maybe in a broader sense, right? You got a pretty complex technology stack, right? Across the way, you kind of have a pretty high demand on your vendor themselves will be involved. What do they have in place? And in fact, the API access. I'd love to have you share a little bit of your experience with us, and more importantly, what do you expect out of other vendors when it comes down to API access?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you said, I was involved early, and I think when I first came on board, the one of the first question or one of the first things I was told, Sergio was one of the first ones I spoke to about Slide, and said it's going to be a fully open API. It is
Mm.
anything you can do in the console, you can do with the API, and that instantly triggered, wow, this could really work. The idea that the integrations are so much simpler when the API is easy to understand, whenever we're working with MSPs in general, we have to sometimes we have to keep the barrier to entry low. If we make the API easy, that makes writing integrations easy. That means that third parties, whether that's our PSAs or our RMMs, they can write integrations quickly and really help that adoption. And that really helps prove the value for our customers. That's what we're trying to do, right? With Slide or any other platform is we need we need the value of the product. We need the support from the product, and we need the security from the product. And from the get-go, that is what Slide is built upon. And that just makes it awesome. So I mean, and then there's the icing on the cake that I get to break things, and then you guys fix them. That's awesome too, because I was trying to create as many internal tickets even before launch as I could. I only got a few because there really wasn't that many things to break. It was well thought out from the get-go. So really excited for what's next. And I think bringing the MCP on board really allows us to go from concept of what we can do with AI to reality of we are actually able to do this. This goes from just chatting with your data, and it's really cool to have that really smart chatbot to talk to and figure out how to scan the knowledge base and do a RAG from that. That's cool. But when you can actually have it do something for you, when you can say, hey, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. Can you create this restore for me? And it does it. That MSPs can really leverage in the future.
I think that's something that Tim even mentioned, right? You probably have some staff that sit around all day, or some poor soul that said whenever a ticket comes in, say, I'm looking for this file. I think it's named this, and it's on one of this machine that's a couple of days ago. Like, I'm curious what your thoughts are to that point, because Dan kind of opened up a thread of interesting
No, it's
conversation,
an
right?
interesting question. That poor soul is I think on this webinar right now,
Oh
and
no, sorry, whatever
so
your
he's
name
probably
is.
on this.
Yeah.
He's one of our expert is on the call right now. But I think that also just a follow. I agree with everything that Dan just said. But one of the other things that I really liked when I was working with Austin at PAX 8 was that the ability of you really had to have specialized knowledge where the large language model, let's say you start your job as MSP, you just come in and you are working, it's going to give you some of that, it has that knowledge built in, in the LM how to do a lot of this work. So I think there's
Mhm.
also it's also speeds up, the training, the training and usability of the product. But I think that again, it's a tool that's going to assist the people we currently have doing this, so that they can do other things that are more high value than looking for a needle in a haystack for a file, which I think is a really a really good example.
Mhm.
Being able to automate some of the disaster recovery and produce the reports associated with them. That's another way that we could scale the business and add that. We don't sell it to every single client, but we would be able to do that as part of our package now. That's something we can include because we have now the resources to be able to do some of these things.
Yeah.
Did that answer the question, Carlson?
Yeah. No, it's interesting because I just, as I think we chat about this the other day, right? It's like how do you really use these capability, AI in general, right, to fit in organization, take over the boring work that's over that postal, but now you can really redeploy that individual, train them, upskill them in the specific things, right? And to that point, I love to kind of pivot that over a little bit to Austin. I actually see Michael that's also popped in. Love to have you guys' perspective, right? When you guys co-found a Slide, right? I think there's a couple of things I've learned, right? One thing that we've seen is there's definitely a huge push on this entire API access, the capability of that. I'd love to hear from, Austin a little bit of, what's your mindset behind it? Why do you feel like this is so important? This API needs to be almost functional one-to-one to UI UX. And then to some extent, maybe Michael, you kind of comment on that when it comes to the openness and thinking the mentality of what really make us, make the modern approach versus the just another iteration of the BCDR world. So maybe start with Austin on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer there is just that there's always been this panacea around integration, right? Like MSPs deal with all these different tools, whether it's the AV tools, whether it's their RMM, their PSA, and at the edges where those tools touch each other, there's always
Mhm.
been the weakest part of every tool. And so if we wanted to build something great, we should make that piece incredibly strong. And by allowing Slide to have this open API and plug in with everybody and saying like, the last thing that we want to do is be one of these giant conglomerated platforms that says that integration is just SSO. But instead being like, look, you can use the Slide product wherever you want. You can use it in Claude. You could use it in any other tool out there. You don't need to come to our API. Come to our interface. Like having that universal availability is so important, and it makes backup so much more valuable. And sort of some of the conversations that we've had as we kind of pulled that thread, and you're talking to Kyle at Huntress, and he's like, wait, so like if we find ransomware, we could pull the unransomware version of the backup like out and restore it right away. And it's like, yeah, API can do that. And like anybody can give you the key. It's possible to make that happen. There's no cost involved. All the documentation is out there. Like just go for it. And so bringing that mentality is just so different than anything else out there. But I think it's going to be so important in helping MSPs make their workflows more efficient and really push what they can do.
Michael, any thought?
Look, the foundation of the whole idea behind Slide was to sort of, as we always say, bring back the magic, right? And it's all about empowering MSPs, doing the right thing, giving them more tools to help them grow their business, to help them make their businesses more efficient, to enable them to integrate their tools together. Not everyone is going to want to standardize on one totem pole of tools, right? There's lots of great tools out there, and they should all be able to work together. And we're gonna lead the charge on that. It shouldn't be a surprise that that's how we approach it.
All right, so Dan apparently is going to like firebomb this conversation, so I'm going to let him open it up. So he got some fun stuff to share with the folks here.
Well, I just wanted to mention, I think there was a question earlier about can you use this, or where's the best place to use this? Is it Claude? Is it wherever? And I mentioned obviously MCP is supported across all frontier models now, but Claude Desktop has that functionality built in. But there's a cool piece that Slide has been working on, and it's actually chat.slide recipes. So it's a kind of a, another subdomain to the slide.recipes that they shared earlier, which is actually Claude integrated in the browser. All you do is drop your Slide API key in, and you can actually run it right there in the browser without having to download Claude Desktop and set up the MCP server, which is actually pretty easy, but it's a really low barrier to entry. And I think it just proves, like I said earlier, if we keep the bar low, we'll get people to try it and experiment with it. In Sergio's slides, he mentioned with prompting, as all of us have used ChatGPT. I mean, my wife just creates projects with me out of ChatGPT, like, hey, paint this wall or do this. But even yesterday, she said ChatGPT is just not getting it. And it's like, well, what are you telling
I think she's
it?
saying Dan is not getting it. I think
that's really
Dan
it.
is not getting my message.
That was really it. It was a rough night. So I think that's a really cool way to test it, and a really easy way to really see what it can do. Create a DR plan for your clients. There's really, no risk there.
So, well, it's interesting, right? So maybe for Tim perspective, now you see, I would love to have you speak a little bit on your view, because I think you recently spoke from a couple panel. You talked about where do you see the adoption of the AI and how it fits in? And I think most interesting, Dan kind of touched on an interesting piece, prompting, right? Assuming that we got a perfect tools, everything get put into place. The prompting really come to, are you able to ask the right question? Are you asking the appropriate question? How are you thinking that evolution and where that train of the skill, how do you train the people to the right way so they're asking the right question versus the wrong question? Because I don't know if the AI is smart enough to know if it's right or wrong yet. So curious on your thought on those.
Yeah, that's a great question, Carlson. I think there's a couple things. Dan touched on first using the right model for the job that you're kind of attempting to use, and depending if you're doing something that's going to be writing based, mathematical based, deep research, image creation. So knowing what you're doing there. But I think it's very important, even Austin showed this in the very beginning, making sure you have context first. So it knows, give context first before you go into the prompt engineering part. And I think that when I talked about, basically this would be for MSPs that are just kind of getting started with AI in general, or small businesses. It's kind of starting small, getting, first, training, having a training program for users, an acceptable use policy, and a way for people to just start using a secure tool. So you're not putting information in a free version of a chat GTP or any type of those engines. So I think you really need to get started, and have some base level security, and have those things in place, as a technology provider. And as you're implementing this potentially in your small business, it's also important. So I think that is also a very important area to do that. And like creating a low barrier entry to make it easy to use is really important. So people, it's like second nature. Anybody could pick this up. It's kind of like just using, when they design the iPhone, you just know how to use it. It's kind of the same thing. It's just second nature. You're as a human, you know how to interact with it and work with it. I think that's a really important part as well.
Okay, so it's interesting. You guys almost intentionally tied on to my next series of things I want to kind of talk about. You kind of touch on the big word security, right? I've seen a lot of question came into the place. What I like to do, maybe I'd love to have Austin kind of comment a little bit about security in general. There's some question related to, is it
Yeah.
secure? Should I be scared of AI? And then I will want to loop back to Tim and then Dan to wrap up before we jump into the Q&A. So maybe Austin, you can speak a bit about the security in general. There's been a lot of concerns about this.
Mhm. So, first off, like security is a layered process. And step one is that you should use your least privileged user that you're comfortable with in creating the API key. So if you create a very low privileged user and create an API key for that user, it will only be able to do whatever that user can do. So that's like worth thinking about in that sense. On top of that, the MCP tool that I created has the ability to create and delete restores, but will not be able to delete backups or agents without you changing the setting at runtime. And so that was just a choice there. And if you look at the documentation, it'll show you can lock it down further, or you can open it up. You can turn on and off different tools associated with the MCP server itself. So those things are all kind of built in by default. I think on the I'm afraid that the LLM is going to train on my data component. I think that barring some law that actually allows you to truly control that, the answer is you lose. If you Claude says they don't train, like Anthropic says they do not train on the stuff that you pass through their API or use with their desktop client. But the reality is that if you're interacting with Chrome, you've actually already consented to give all of the information that you see inside Chrome to Google to train their AIs. So the process is sort of it's not possible as a consumer to actually do your work in a way that you're hiding it from these giant tech companies.
Any final thought regarding security, Dan and Tim?
Go ahead, Dan.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that's pretty much true right there. Least privilege. You still exercise least privilege. The same concepts, the general security concepts we use every day in our MSP still apply. At least if so, the least rights possible. The MCP tool, both the slide MCP tool, but just looking at the entire ecosystem of MCP tools out there, we need is that they can almost always be limited in what they can do, either via API, so the actual credentialing doesn't allow you to do it, or the tool use is limited. You could say disable tool function A, B, C, D, whatever they are. Then there's the second piece of the LLM data. They all say, especially with paid model, if you go to Google, I use Gemini a lot, and I've used Gemini with the tool. If you go to Gemini or Google's AI Studio and you look, it says in there, if you're using the free tokens that they give you, however many million tokens per day or whatever it is, they can and may use your data for training. So definitely read the terms and conditions and understand what they may say they'll do with your data. While we cannot control what they are going to actually do with it if you use it through Chrome or something else. If you go to a paid model, whether it's Anthropic, whether it's OpenAI, whether it's Google, any of the frontier models, they won't if it's paid. They all have in their terms and conditions, we will not use this to train. Will they? I don't know. But at least we have it in writing from them saying they won't. The other option, you could spend a whole bunch of money and build an AI server in your office at home. That's what I did. And big caveat there, it takes a lot of work to make a AI model that's designed for a $100,000 piece of hardware to run on a $2,500 piece of hardware, but it will work. It just takes a lot of work to do it. So you always have ways around it, but I think there's a risk reward and you just have to evaluate that for your business and the data that you're giving it access to. If it's really just backup data, I guess threat actors could like that, but at the end of the day, if they don't have a way to delete the backup data, it's less of a real security concern.
I think the other thing that's important is that like all the MCP server work is done open source. And so you can see, modify, fork, change whatever you want to do with the data that passes through it or how it works. And that way you know that there's no sort of funny business going on. And all the same stuff, like I see David Lewis's comment that backup data could have HIPAA or DoD. Those are all true, but that's the same thing anywhere else if you were to restore it. And so, whether you use the API with an LLM or you use the API in any other way, you carry kind of the same set of risks. And that is what it is. And the same thing if you, downloaded that data to a laptop.
I would say too, just kind of echo the same everything that Austin and Dan are saying. I'd say that having that ability, have the guardrail in that, having the API can only do so many things. So somebody can't delete all your backups on you by if they got access to the AP key, bad actor got access to it somehow and started doing that. If they got access to it, they could restore data. So that'd be another way that's one of the biggest concerns, I think, is looking how do you protect against that from happening, in the period. And you've talked about having a layered approach, to that. So, but that's definitely something important to test and validate anything that before you roll something like this out, when you're getting ready to go, before you go in production.
I think there's another point there on that HIPAA and DoD data. I wholly agree and understand, but the LLM can also be limited to not have access to the actual data. And when I say backup data, I just mean effectively the statistics of the backups. So you can limit the LLM down so it can't go do. I think in the demo earlier it did show, right, you can click the file and actually download the file. For you can limit that tool call down so that it can't generate the actual file, so you can download the file. It can only say boot a restore, but if you can't access the restore because you don't have a way to do it, the LLM isn't reading the data on its own accord. So you definitely can limit it, but absolutely you have to evaluate it case by case potentially, or business by business, and determine if the value's there for a specific MSP and your clients.
And this is an opportunity for me to make a shameless pitch for you to attend our security webinar on August 21st.
Yeah. Yep. All right. So any other thought? Because it seems like we actually answered a lot of the question on there. Now, I'll say that there's one question that got asked, and I'm going to put it out there for Austin and maybe even Michael to answer. And we'll have to open up the line from the case because we pointed him to go to Austin's GitHub channel. So I think his question come from Brad Palmer. Can we unmute him? I think he got a question related to OpenRT. So you might as well hit it. We got the right people in the room. So Brad,
Awesome.
go for it.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome. I was actually getting ready to type in the chat. Maybe this is not the right conversation for this question.
No, we're gonna do it. This is an open forum.
Thank you for opening it up. So I've used a fresh Ubuntu server with the script provided from the GitHub. I've also used the pre-built VM. I'm able to mount a round-trip device and browse the files through the OpenRT interface. But when I connect to SMB, NFS, or FTP, all folders are empty. Am I doing something wrong?
I don't know. Can you email me with that? I will take a look. Because like that could be a me thing.
Okay.
The thing that I might check is look at if there's some sort of a permissions mask component that's causing those files to be hidden. But there should be a way to change that, and it might be the config of the FTP or the CIF server that would be creating that problem.
Yeah, so I thought it could have been a credential issue as well. So I also SSH'd into the pre-built VM
Yep.
and went to the RT mount location using SSH, did a LS command inside of there, and it's still showing empty even through SSH. But
But
the
it shows in
the
the
open
web browser
RT,
URL.
yeah, the web browser URL, I can browse, I can click on files, I can even click on a file and it'll download.
Then you're looking at two different spots.
Okay.
Because the web browser URLs are literally generated based off an Apache base config. And so like it's like a .ht access file that says like make it look pretty. And so you're browsing like a raw directory tree as far as Apache is concerned. And what I might do is run a mount command, take a look at where the points are mounted, and follow that down. But it's important to not like you can fall down the rabbit hole if you do like ZFS list and look for the ZFS mounts, because that's just going to be where the backup points are mounted. But then what OpenRT does is then decode the .data files and mount those as loops. And then those loops are mounted in a different spot. They all sit inside like the /tmp directory. So when you reboot, they're gone and it will start over. But you're probably just in the wrong folder. But I should check because like the CIFs and FTP should work. And I'll take a look. But I would say like email me or open a GitHub request of like, hey, fix this jerk, and like I will fix it. But it's very hard because like otherwise I hear about like OpenRT challenges from a person who talked to a person who said a thing, and like that's like, oh man, that's a lot of work to figure out what's going on. But yeah, anywhere that you find an issue, let me know and I'll go and change it and fix it.
Okay, perfect. I put my email in the chat under hosts and panels if someone wants to just shoot me over Austin's email, and then I can work with you, Austin, and send you some screenshots or get on a remote session, whatever you feel comfortable with.
So Brad, now you broadcast your email to about 78 people
That's
plus
fine.
everyone else who's going to be,
You're going to get, offers for a new cell phone service or something.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't post it to everyone. I posted it to hosts and panelists.
Okay, cool. All right.
Oh no,
Well, Austin posted everyone. So
I'm not worried. Like you can find a lot about me on the internet these days, so it just is what it is, and I'm used to living with it.
Yeah. All right, let me flow the next question. We got Adam. So let's cut him in and we'll quick questions and then we'll do a quick wrap to just end on time. Adam, bring you online.
Yeah, to me, like this is all great and exactly what I'm here for. Like I love seeing the integration, especially with Claude. Claude, I use Cursor all the time, and I like the web pages you put together to be able to just show this to people that aren't that familiar with it. But I'm also looking at this documentation, and there, I see just plain old, regular API endpoints you could program with any language. Seems like for everybody who's worried about LLMs, the API is really extensive and available too. So I just feel like everybody's like weirdly hung up on this one thing when, like the typical tools are there too.
Yeah, the goal behind this discussion is to one, talk about how MSPs are going to leverage LLMs, but in order to do that effectively, that powerful API is the base upon which that foundation.
You need the boring part. And I think the thing is just that LLMs take a lot of the drudgery out of it, and like to get to that first call of like, hey, list my devices, right? Like the LLM can just bang that out. Whereas like if you're just trying to make sure that you've got curl set up correctly and are dealing with exactly how the API wants it, like that ends up being annoying. And next thing you know, like you lost an hour before you've even made your first successful API call. And the LLMs kind of supercharge your productivity with a lot of that stuff.
I'm in full agreement. I just mean it seems like half the focus of the chat was the concern around that. And it's like, the typical tools are still there. And
Which is actually, it's a huge, the API is a huge driving force, I think, for adoption, to be honest, because every single MSP, right? We're using these tools, whether it's in RMM or your PSA, because you can either automate or one-click automate. As soon as Sergio told me about the fully open API, the first thing I thought was, you know how cool it would be to go into ConnectWise when you have a failed backup and click start a new backup. Bam, right there, and just do it. There's no logging, or if you have alerts, can I resolve the alerts right from ConnectWise or whatever PSA you choose? No, not a huge proponent of ConnectWise or anything, just use it. So, you know, but like that's the huge part, I think, is that all those pieces are still there. Cool. The MCP is cool. The AI is cool, and it's really important because I do think the industry is pushing that way. I think Tim, I think all of us probably agree on the panel that the industry is pushing the AI because it is can be very well leveraged if done appropriately. But yes, the open API makes it very easy to do standard integrations, and that's what I started out. My first within the first few days of having access to an API key, I was in Postman doing requests, trying to make sure I understood the API. But the cool part about using MCP or any LLM to understand the AI is when you use a chain of thought or a reasoning model, and you can actually understand how it gets to its solution. And I think that's really kind of neat, is even if you don't leverage it for business and you just try to understand how the API works or how the tool calling works, you can see how it thinks, and it helps you just understand the AI in general. Because a lot of times the AI operates like that junior developer.
Yep.
You look at the API just like you or me, we look at the API and we go, cool, I'm going to do a get request, and you just try it get, you know, devices. But you can see how it works through it. And even in the demo earlier, there's a certain section where the AI got it wrong. It said, hey, I did that wrong, even though it has all the docs. And that system prompt is 2,000 words, I think. I think the system prompt is pretty close to that. It's pretty big. It's very good. And it still got it wrong. But you know what it did? Just like you or me would do. Huh, you know what? I did that wrong. I'm going to try it a different way. So that's what makes it really cool and really to leverage the tool. But absolutely, the API is great.
And we log those and then realize like I've got to write a better prompt or I've got to write better documentation around how to do it to steer it down those paths. But yeah.
Great. Well, thank you for everybody. I know we're right on time, but maybe just do one quick thing at the end, as Michael kind of mentioned. First, thank you for all the panelists. Thank you, Austin, Sergio, everybody. You know, as you know, I love doing these webinars like an improv. You know, as time goes by, we're going to throw it through, and we also got Rebecca behind the scenes freaking her out. I'm prompting people, bringing them live, but that's what makes us fun and authentic. And the thing is, we're already continue thinking about what these series look like. The next one actually coming in October. Sorry, August. August. Sorry, wrong day. I'm so far ahead. August. We're actually going to be getting laser focused on the topic of security. I think there's been a lot of conversation about security in general. How do I secure my backup? How to secure MCP we talked about. Some of you, probably many of you know of Ryan Weeks. You know, he was a former CISO at Datto. He had moved on to do video stuff as a CISO, but he's also an advisor for us at Slide. He's going to join us on a very similar type of panel environment, alongside Michael, who actually have joined us, you know, was in this doing the panel section. And Phil really talked about some of the innovation within the Slide environment that's specifically making your environment more secured. I would just say, you know, a lot of things that we're doing, including what you saw today in the security side of the equation, is the entire organization we have done for many years, and other players in the market are not even thinking about it at the moment. So we would definitely urge you to take a look at it, sign up, and we'll see you on the next one. And the recording of this will be sent out to everybody. So thank you very much for coming, and we'll see you next month.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.